have pasture ground on your farm. We certainly have some. And every year there are always some weeds that pop up that you say, boy, I gotta get those things under control. And then you get busy with spring planting and then you're spraying your crop, and pretty soon the weeds are so big you don't do a good job controlling them. What are you gonna do this year to stop those weeds?
Many of those tough weeds are perennials and biennials, and that's the big problem. When we're talking about pasture, when we are not doing tillage, when we're not having a lot of annual crops out there, we don't have as much trouble with annual weeds. So the ones that we do have get a great start in the fall. They build up a lot of energy in that big root system, and in the spring, they're way ahead of everything else. So pastures must be dealt with early, and they also must be dealt with in the fall. And in those two situations, we can do a great job with weed control, and we've never had more products to choose from than right now.
Okay, so let's get specific on products. I'm just going to quiz you a little bit on pasture weeds, and what do you think the best thing we should do in the pasture would be to control that weed? So let's start with weed number one in all pastures seems to be Canada thistle. What are you going to do? What's the best product?
The best one out there is Milestone. It's a new product, just been out for a few years. It's not a restricted use product. It's very safe to humans. It's a great product to use. Low use rate. It's really not all that expensive, and it does a fantastic job killing thistles, roots and all, so you don't have to go back and fight them 5 times every year like you do with 2,4-D.
Okay, how about the biennial thistles, musk thistle and boll thistle?
Well, I like Milestone again. Now, there are a number of different products that can work on those biennials. You could use some Tordon or a combination product like Grazon. You could use some Ally. That would be okay to do too in combination with a 2,4-D or in combination with Milestone in a product like Chaparral. Now Chaparral is really the Cadillac of these products. It does a great job on the woody species. Really the only weakness on Chaparral is going to be leafy spurge. It's not going to be as good as Tordon by itself.
Okay, so speaking about leafy spurge, what would you pick there?
Well, this is the great part. Tordon has come way down in price. Over the last couple of years, it's been cut in half. So Tordon has never been more affordable. And if you have leafy spurge, a straight rate of 1 quart per acre of Tordon does a really nice job. Spray the patch and then make 1 extra pass around the outside in case there are any shoots about to come up. You could wipe leafy spurge out literally in 1 year. That's awesome.
Okay, let's move on to something completely different. How about trees? I got some trees out in the pasture that I really don't want them to be there anymore. What do you do to get rid of them?
I just had this question come up today. If I've got a tree that's got a whole bunch of little sprouts out there, can I kill the little sprouts and leave the desirable big tree? Well, that's going to be really tough to do. But if you want to kill all the trees that are out there, Tordon does a really nice job killing trees.
All right, let's say that you've got a pasture and you want to save the trees. You don't want to kill the trees, but you've got a whole bunch of weeds near the trees out in your pasture. What should you use there?
Then it's 2,4-D. If you've got 2,4-D spraying to do it real early in the spring or real late in the fall when those trees aren't budding. If those trees are budding, you can do some severe damage to the trees even with 2,4-D. So get out there very early this season, control the weeds with 2,4-D. You may need to use a hand sprayer or something like that to get right up underneath them, and you should be just fine. But that's the best weed control you can do.
How about spraying near water? Which one of these products can I use? Tordon, Milestone, 2,4-D, any or all?
Well, you definitely can't use Tordon. Tordon is pretty tough on fish. With Milestone, it's labeled right up to the edge of water, but you don't want to drift it out on the water. So you can use it on the banks, but you have to be careful. With 2,4-D, there are forms of 2,4-D that are water-based rather than oil-based, and those could be even labeled to spray right over the top of water. You'll have to check your labels to make sure you're okay.
Speaking of labels, which products are restricted use and which ones could you use if you don't have a restricted use license?
Well, anything with Tordon in it is going to be restricted use, but 2,4-D and Milestone are not.
Well, 2,4-D might be, depending on the county that you live in. There are a few counties in the United States where 2,4-D would be restricted, so make sure you check what the rules are in your county and in your state. Okay, finally, I guess Darren mentioned this already with Tordon, but I think it's very important to note Tordon has come way down in price. So if you thought before that it was too expensive to control leafy spurge or, some other weeds out there, with Tordon being half price of what it was just 2 years ago, you got to relook at this whole thing. Additionally, with 2,4-D, a lot of farmers used to try to get by with a pint of 2,4-D or a pint and a half of LV6, something like that. You really want to bump that rate up to a full quart of LV6. We have a lot of weeds that seem to be building tolerance out in the pasture. Just make sure you're using a good strong rate.
Well, the other thing I would mention is if you're using anything with Tordon, Milestone, or Ally in it, if you're ever thinking that ground may potentially be crop ground at some point, stop using using them right now and several years before you consider tearing that ground up and turning it into crop ground. Just use 2,4-D and kill the weeds out there. You may have to make 2 or 3 trips a year to do a good job with weed control, but you'll be a lot better off because you can rotate to just about anything.
Unfortunately, none of these Pasture products will control our weed of the week. We'll tell you what will coming up next.